I think every role in every company will change. If it hasn't already, it will.
In this new world of AI agents, how do you think about the customer relationship? Who owns it? Is it the brand? Is it the platform?
The more you realize that the relationship that is being built isn't between the human and the merchant, it's between the agent and the merchant.
The math is fundamentally changing. The variables are so much more complex.
Disrupt yourself is the mentality. Those that are more task-oriented, they're all ripe for an intelligence layer to end up being dominantly AI-driven.
As humans, we have a history of optimizing the web for human consumption. Now we also have to start optimizing the web for agents.
Think about augmentation ahead of replacement. You're empowering people to surprise you with how the value that they can add in the system. They were never in it for the act of mechanical writing. They were in it for the act of telling the stories. And so they were able to transform to becoming authors.
Do you think we'll see a billion-dollar company with just one person?
Brand loyalty is going nowhere. Make the tools available to everyone. Encourage experimentation. Encourage sharing of ideas. In a world where code is cheap, action is cheap, intelligence is cheap, you really need decision-making to not become your bottleneck. You're going to have to rethink and retool how you review and how you distribute this kind of role and responsibility.
Hey everyone, welcome to the AI CXO podcast. Today we're all here standing at the edge of one of the biggest shifts in retail since perhaps the smartphone and maybe even the internet. Welcome to the era of agentic commerce, where AI doesn't just recommend which products you buy, but also potentially buys them for you. For every founder, C-suite executive, and product leader, the math is fundamentally changing. The variables are so much more complex. For example, if a customer is checking something out in a chatbot, who really owns that customer relationship? Is it you? Is the brand? Is it the chatbot? If an AI agent is making a purchasing decision, what happens to your brand identity, your funnel, your conversion metrics? To deconstruct this new world and help us think about it, I'm delighted today to be joined by Mani Fazeli, a VP at Shopify, who's been working a lot on their AI shopping strategy. He'll help us understand this better today. Mani, I'm delighted to chat with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Before we get into the details, and we're going to get into a bunch of them, can I quickly have you tell us and the audience, what do you do at Shopify and what are you most excited about that you built recently?
Yeah, I'm a VP of product here at Shopify. I've been here for just shy of 6 years, and I've worked on a bevy of different products at the company. What I'd say I'm probably most excited about right now is we just announced yesterday that our simulated gymnasium, or what we call SimGym, launched to all of our merchants, allowing them to run various experiments and A/B tests using simulated AI buyers. And that allows them to hypothesis test and be able to get an idea of whether an idea can work or not before running it with real traffic. And that's pretty exciting. There's a lot of cool tech behind it to be able to achieve that, the personas we create, and the models that we run to do that. So we're pretty proud of it.
No, I've read about that. I'm actually fascinated by what you're doing with SimGym, some of the experiments you're running there. I will have more questions about that for you later. But maybe I can start with something that's really on everyone's mind, which is I think we've all heard about the Universal Commerce Protocol and a lot of the stuff that Shopify and a lot of the ecosystem is doing. So let me start with the basic question. In this new world of AI agents, then let's say we all live in this, world in which we're all mediated by AI agents. How do you think about the customer relationship? Who owns it? Is it the brand? Is it the platform? As an executive in this space, how should I start thinking about this?
I like this question in that it supposes that the world is about to change. And from one angle, it is true. We're not used to having agents that can do exactly that, have agency to take action on our behalf. But on the other hand, you realize that there are many different platforms that have enabled commerce to occur or have facilitated it that were not the merchant who's the end seller to you for a long time. You think about the social revolution and how many products are discovered through Instagram. You think about the search revolution and how many products are discovered through Google. And the key element being that the merchant was able to make themselves aware and present. And then through an interaction that was facilitated by that third party, you were able to arrive and then finally make a decision and make the purchase with the merchant. So now when we think about the degrees of automation that will exist in an agentic world, you've kind of got that crawl, walk, run, fly pattern wherein you have to start out with just changing discovery. Let's break down commerce for a second. With the agents, we think of it as having the discovery portion, then the brand interaction portion, and then the transaction portion. And through that flow, if you think of the old world with Google, the discovery was your keyword search and then some links that took you to an online store that allowed you to do some brand interaction. And then finally, you built a cart and ended up in a checkout. You put in your payment credentials or use some sort of a wallet, digital wallet to accelerate it, and you'd make your purchase. And so your journey had quite a bit of that merchant's positioning with you. Now, when you come to an agent world, let's go with the crawl version. The first thing that's going to be made better is this whole idea of discovery. And so what used to be blue links is now AI mode, or you go to ChatGPT, or you go to Claude, or you go to Copilot, or any of the other tools out there, or the agent harness pairings out there that allow you to search, get facts, refine, go multi-turn instead of one-shotting with a set of keywords, and make you more comfortable about a purchase. Eventually, all that needs to do in order to add value already to our lives is blue link us out to another tab and allow us to make a purchase. The next step after that ends up being, well, what if it was able to harness a series of different products and bring them all together? And what if it was able to pre-fill some information for me and allow me that when I click a link, then I'm now in a further along journey to make the purchase. I don't need to type in my address. It was pre-filled or whatnot. And some of this technology exists. Shopify's had these ideas as part of systems we create with our cart API, with our cart permalinks and such. So that's the next step. The step after that is, what if the purchase could be made for me autonomously using whatever secure payment credentials and such in the ecosystem, but I still had to approve along the way all the actions that need to be taken by this agent to ensure that I get a good, accurate thing that I'm not wanting to return. And then finally, you get to fly mode, which is I basically tell you a set of outcomes I'm looking for, and then I give you a budget and I let you run off. And you can go and do whatever you deem to be the intelligent outcome for me. You go and achieve that with whoever merchants without me approving anything. And then you simply come back and the goods show up at my door a few days from now. So as you go through all this, the question of who owns the relationship and the precedence that we have with the way that platforms have been enabling transactions to be facilitated, you see that the merchant will continue to be a dominant player. But the more you go towards the end of, I simply asked my agent to take a whole bunch of action on my behalf, and it with a set of goals, and it went and automated it all, the more you realize that the relationship that is being built isn't between the human and the merchant, it's between the agent and the merchant. And so this is going to be a fascinating world in which the merchant is now catering towards two kinds of personas. One is the human persona and one is the agent persona. And we'll talk about that more together. Personally, I think that the human persona will continue to be dominant for a very long time, because the other concept to think about here is that the whole discovery through to brand interaction, through to transaction, isn't always utilitarian. It's not always a commodity or a staple or groceries. It's not these repetitive purchases that you're making that you want efficiency and you want minimal interaction. Often purchases require consideration and having a love affair with what the product is. The very activity of going through it will be the joy that you get out of the shopping process, so that you feel connected to the product once you get it. I don't think we're yet at a stage where all that gets automated away.
No, I'm actually really glad you said that, because you said so many interesting things. Let me sort of go through this, right? Which is, I think many people hear that the age of AI shopping is coming and jump immediately to like, oh, this world is going to change completely and I don't recognize it. I love that you added like, there's a crawl, walk, run, and I love that you added the fly phase, which is, some of this change will happen and happen over time. And I think that's a really important message for executives to sort of understand, that there will be this transition. And I think the second part that a lot of people miss is that a lot of shopping is actually a joyful activity, right? People want to connect with the product, connect with the brand. They want to like sort of participate in this deeply. I used to tell a lot of my teams that, when they're doing automation, the worst demo to start with sometimes is shopping, because there's some of these products you want to automate, but not all of them. So it's a real balance. But, you started hinting at something at the end that I want to sort of dive into, which is, as humans, we have a history of optimizing the web for human consumption. But now we also have to start optimizing the web for agents. So I'm curious, like, are you starting to see some of this from your customers? Are people already starting to do this? How real is it versus is this, something that's going to come or that's going to come in the future?
Yeah, that's the right question to ask. Right there is like, do you have the immediate future and then you have what's on the horizon? And so you're asking, like, are we already seeing people try to cater towards agents? Well, the answer is yes, but let's talk about what that means. And also realize that we're at the forefront. We're at the frontier, as you would, to borrow the term from how we call the labs. And so a lot of people are inventing a lot of ideas and experimenting, but much of it won't go anywhere. Much of it will get left behind because the most valuable will be the ones that survive and continue forward as patterns that we'll see in industry. So if we look at the immediate horizon, the current problem is that an agent has to understand you as a brand. It has to understand what products you have, what the details of those products are, what the facts that make the product connect with the buyer are, like things as basic as images and videos, things as basic as titles and descriptions, things as basic as if there are any kind of warning labels that need to be associated with this purchase. And you can think about how that information is discovered and understood isn't like a slam dunk. The problem of commerce in information retrieval and search is as old as any technical search company. And you've seen, for those who are familiar with the evolution of Google and Meta attempting things over the years to bring shopping to feel native and inside of their experiences, there are many battle scars there.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to some of those battle scars.
Yeah, exactly. And those battle scars are from realizing just how complicated commerce is. It's verticals, it's segments, it's geographies, and then you've got the diversity of type of sale you're making. How a furniture company sells is different than how an apparel company sells, which is different than how a beverages company might sell. And the challenge with that is that all the configurations and customizations, the business logic, this all needs to be encapsulated for then an agent to interact with. And so if you go through the discovery to brand interaction to transactability, there is technology that needs to be built for every single one of these steps. For us at Shopify, the first one that we wanted to solve is how do you give accurate, up-to-date, and reliable information about what is the catalog of products that are even available to be purchased and deliver it in a way that agents don't need to go on a per merchant basis, but are able to scan and search across all merchants available in the catalog, get back really high quality universal products with offers within them, knowing all the different sellers and resellers and manufacturers that might be involved, understand pricing, and then be able to help their human being determine what is the right product to go after. And then we have for brand interaction, this idea of the knowledge base, which is an app that allows for FAQ pairs to be created such that you're able to share more about your brand that's available for the LLM to be able to reach via an MCP tool call and learn more in case there are questions that are being asked by the user about maybe your return policy. It could be the different kind of payments that you'll accept. It could be any terms of use you might have. It could be more specific things such as what is your brand ethos or what is it that you're helping with in terms of any kind of what's the word I'm looking for, like social responsibility you might have as a brand. Like think of a brand like Patagonia. And when you want those kinds of facts exchanged, you need some authoritative source. What did the world used to do? You used to scrape all the information off the internet, try to index it, then make it available. But that scraping does not always ensure that the merchant has information that was not prepackaged and put onto their website, but still can be available dynamically based off of information that pertains to a specific product. And of course, once you come to transactions, you realize, and this is the thing that the industry learned through those trials and tribulations, you're not trying to become the merchant. You're not trying to become the merchant of record just to facilitate this transaction. If you become a marketplace that sits in between, that carries a lot of obligations and regulations around it, from tax to Inform Act in the US and such. So because of that, what you actually would prefer is to allow the merchant to be the merchant of record. And so just get the buyer to them, allow them to be the one who collects the payment and does the fulfillment and handles the returns. And in between, you ensure that the buyer has the right experience, but the merchant retains the relationship. So through that flow, you need the APIs and the systems that allow that to happen. That's where UCP came to life. That's where our embedded checkout protocol came to life, so that you are able to facilitate this. So is the world responding to agents? Well, of course, because for each of these steps, you've got to do work. What's the underpinning of all this is that your logic, your data is precisely what's necessary for being molded so that agents understand it, being shaped so that agents know how to communicate with it. And, people throw around the term GEO. There is a bunch of that. Like, I'll give one last example, which is if you shape your data in a way that only your online store can interpret what it means, that it is difficult to piece together, say, a product that has many different variants that you've decided to merchandise by putting as separate products inside of your collection pages, but in fact, they are all the same product, just different versions of it, then how do you want an agent to understand that? Well, it has to do with the way you shape your data and then feed it via something like the Shopify catalog. So these are the things that the industry is now responding to that are on the near term. We could talk separately about the longer term, other things that you need to be doing in industry.
No, I love what you're saying. Let's think a little bit about the longer term as well. I'd love for you to continue, and let's think about, in the near term even, people, you raise these great points about people have this myopic view that the only sort of thing that matters is price. But in reality, like, customers value so much about the brand. Like, there's certain values that they're looking for. They're looking for very specific things. There's so much nuance in what they're deciding. If anything, in this agentic world, to make it easier for the right customer to find the right brand and to build that relationship.
Even price, like people say, like price is the thing that matters. Well, price is contextual. What region are you in? Is it an authenticated user? Does that authenticated user belong to a VIP group that has an automatic 15% discount because of a loyalty tier that they've hit? Like even something as basic as price. Also, the fact that price has changed in real time, right? The world is a sophisticated place in the way that it does its margin management, right? So even that one value is something that's tricky to bring into an agentic world. We've done a lot of work to make that happen, but it's funny that you mentioned it. Longer term, of course, you also have the idea of how you leverage AI for interactions with the human buyer and how you leverage AI for interactions with the agentic buyer. So here's an interesting example. Going back to the basics of data that's accurate and provided for your products to the agent. If you have OpenClaw representing the individual, and it's learned the shopping skill, like we actually have one from Shopify, that it is able to discover, say, a set of shorts you're buying to go on vacation. And you're like, cool, it found me a set of shorts and it wants to pull accurate images to show me. But I also tell it, you know what? You already have a picture of me and you have some of my traits, my height, my weight, my, gender and all that. Can you generate me using Nano Banana Pro or whatever other image generator, an image of me wearing those shorts? Let me see what I look like. And, there's lots of specialty models and such being created for doing this stuff, but even the frontier models that are generically for image generation are quite good at this. So if I want that to work, I want to be able to rely on the accuracy of that before I make my purchasing decision. So now go longer term and imagine that there are agents, the moment you arrive at an online store, are able to interact with you to help you make decisions as a human and help you decide what to buy, what sizes to buy. You know how you sometimes go to like a shoe store, they'll have a sizing chart that says typically fits half a size smaller, half a size bigger, or you're buying ski boots, typically wear one size smaller than what you have from your running shoes. Like these kinds of ideas, you can imagine that any kind of agent can now be helping you and interacting with you rather than you just clicking through the interface. And in that world, you might have your own agent going to speak with that other agent. So now you get agent to agent interactions where they're going to be able to, again, rather than hitting an MCP server to try to pull some facts, you have an intelligence layer that's able to interpret the inquiry from one agent and then process and respond with another. Whether this will stick or whether it will be too costly, whether the token cost or the rate of token output and all these things that are going to evolve constantly end up being favorable or not, these are still the things people will experiment with. So going back to my earlier point, like we're at the frontier, we're all going to be experimenting. Lots of ideas will be coming out of this nature.
No, by the way, as someone who's had to return a ton of shoes because things said like, oh, buy a half size bigger. And then I did. And then it turned out, no, actually, you should have bought the other size. I'm fully supportive of those tokens being spent to solve that problem. I like that. But let me ask you a separate question, which is having worked with a lot of people at Shopify, I know how much checkout and matters to you, how you think about it. How you think about it is really important to merchants and brands. And the value that Shopify adds. Do you feel like that will continue to be an important part of the flow, or do you think that'll evolve?
No, absolutely, it stays. The reason being, if you refer back to the dominant pattern to follow for success here is to allow the merchant to be the merchant of record. That means that it should be their platform that processes that payment and then is able to generate that order. Well, a ton of business logic gets executed at that point. Validations and order routing and fulfillment constraints and delivery option generators and cart transformations and discount applications. And, I could go on. There's much more that happens just in our platform, and you can imagine that of other players. So when a merchant is configuring all this information for whether the sale comes from a social channel or an agentic channel or their own online store or their point of sale, commerce is holistically this omni-channel or multi-channel world. The execution of that logic is paramount. And that's where the accuracy and the quality of experience matters. So we used to be in a world, or still are actually, and the vast majority of commerce goes through this, wherein you hit a website and then you'll get the power of something like ShopPay and you'll have an accelerated experience without losing any of the customizations that the merchant has. That merchant may be asking you additional questions that are mandatory, getting you to agree to a set of terms. For example, if something's final sale, getting you to verify your age if it's a controlled substance, getting you to have an option of white glove delivery service if it's furniture that is coming from a distance and maybe you need to take old furniture away as a result of the package. Like, all of these are things that are the power of your checkout and the flexibility of a checkout as powerful as Shopify's to define for all these industries and all these verticals a fantastic experience that doesn't lose the power of acceleration and ease of use and accessibility and all the other things that you demand out of it all over the world. So when you have agents running through it, maybe there are some agents with UCP that will be able to run through the entire transaction without ever needing the human to be involved. But some of these use cases we talked about, they may not yet be handleable over API. There are customizations that come to life not from just some knobs, dials, and fields inside of the Shopify admin, but from a bevy and a huge set of developers that have been building on top of our platform using APIs and components we make available to them that render in a checkout. So there are use cases that may require a human to come back into the loop. And we invented UCP to allow for this. There's an idea in it called requires escalation, passes back a continue URL that then can be either optionally loaded in a web view or with another tech we have called the embedded checkout protocol that allows for continuity to be felt inside of whatever the interface of the chat system that you're using. So it doesn't feel like you're jumping between screens or necessarily between apps. And so the embedded checkout allows you to take over where the bot was unable to complete via API. And at that point, the human's back in the loop, they complete, and you get a seamless journey. So I do think that the checkout continues to be paramount and critical in this new world.
As you explain this, I know a lot of execs in this space worry a lot about, in this new world, does brand loyalty go away, right? Like, does it become less important because you have these layers? But you're actually, I feel like, as I heard you speak, making a different case, which is in some cases, people may care even more about this, like brand loyalty matter even more.
I don't think brand loyalty goes away in this world any more so than it would have gone away when you are purchasing from, say, Amazon or Walmart. There are two separate brands, right? The platform that enabled you to make a purchase. So you might have loyalty to Amazon or Walmart or Home Depot, or it might become, in the new world, could it be Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT? You'll have that loyalty for many reasons. They're not helping you just with commerce. They're helping you with a bevy of things, intelligence across your entire life, professional and personal combined. But then the thing you fall in love with is the product you purchased. Is it, I'm at a setup right now having this chat with you. There's products all around me. The table I sit at, the chair I sit on, the microphone I have here, the monitor in front of me, the camera that's recording me, the mouse and keyboard I use, the laptop I bought. Each of those are made by a brand. And so the brand loyalty ends up being with how excellent and gratifying that value exchange ended up being. The dollars I spend, not just the pathway I spent them on, but the way that it actually felt once I unboxed it and put it to work for me. And that brand loyalty is going nowhere. And in fact, it will get reinforced in a couple of interesting ways. I predict that the word of mouth will become ever more powerful in a world where LLMs are mediating more of discovery. Even if you disregard everything past discovery. In the world of discovery, what is an LLM? The large language model is our best representation of the facts of the world represented in a giant dimensional space. And then based off of an inquiry you have, finding the clusters of information that are closest matched to that world understanding. So here, if you say, find me high quality headphones, well, where did it get that information? It's not just marketing spiel. It's not just whoever shouted the loudest or whoever paid the most advertising dollars. It's base model training, the pre-training models, and then the reinforcement models, and then all the tool calls that they'll have. You'll have intelligence about what the latent understanding of the product is. Maybe it was fed with like Reddit reviews and everything else on the internet. Then the facts, Wikipedias and such of like what the products were, the actual sites of the merchants. But now you've also got all of the additional information and facts that could be pulled in real time, whether from Shopify catalog or many other sources or scraped, whatever that ends up being, that try to pull in the latest and greatest information about how people feel about a product. That's just bread and butter stuff, right? That word of mouth, whether it is review sites or it's what your friends are telling you. And indeed, that's going to end up factoring ever more because you're in a fact-based comparison world when you're doing these product comparisons in your chat. Now, jury's out what happens as advertising gets introduced into this world. We're only at the very beginning of seeing ads emerge, right? We know Google's playing with this. We know that OpenAI has already announced it and they've started trialing it. So let's see where the ads goes and how that influences this reality. But I think we'd all want to ensure that ads don't get to a place that they end up overwhelming the experience. At least we all hope that the ads won't overwhelm the experience of these fact engines that we could go multi-turn and refine our thinking based off our, wishes, desires, and outcomes.
100%. This has been a fascinating discussion. I want to change tracks a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about something you mentioned earlier, which is SimGym. We live in this really interesting new world, and I have some experience with this with consumer products where you can now pretty reliably simulate customer behavior. I'm curious now that you're able to roll this out to merchants, right? Like, what does it mean for them that now they're able to simulate buyer behavior on their site? It offers so many interesting possibilities. I'm curious what the early reception has been like from your merchants.
Yeah, early reaction has been fantastic. People are absolutely stoked. I've only read positives. I'm sure there are places where, because it's a research preview, there are still things that it doesn't quite get right. Again, building at the frontier has that risk at all times. But so far, the feedback's been fantastic. And as we've been scaling it, and now we just made it available to all merchants, we're going to get more data coming in. And of course, we're trying to move beyond the first version of it is that you could do basically A/B comparisons of two themes for your storefront. We're going to shortly also have the capability that you could do a teardown of a single theme, which is you're able to ask it questions of different dimensions to say, without me running two different themes against each other, tell me how you feel about this theme. So that should absolutely change the behavior of the user, wherein they do many more hypothesis testing in a simulated world. And they're able to then take the ones that feel most promising and then use another feature of Shopify, which is called rollouts, to be able to then distribute that either at a specific point in time or if they have enough traffic, running it as a true A/B test and then gathering yet more signal. And this pattern of just, I have an idea, let me see its merits. Oh, it's looking promising. Let me execute it. Let me measure in the real world. That will allow brands to feel more confident in the kinds of experiments and changes they want to run to differentiate themselves, to connect better with their customers, and to not feel as beholden to guessing, which is something that every company does, every professional does. And the simulations are going to get ever cheaper, easier, more accurate, that are going to allow you to just think differently than you used to.
No, I agree absolutely. I really think this sort of raises the floor for everyone. Like people that couldn't even didn't have the ability to think deeply about their experience. You can now suggest all sorts of things like if you do this thing, it looks dramatically better. If you do this other thing, it changes your conversions dramatically and stuff like that.
If you imagine it further, you could think, well, what if we proactively ran it for you and then we could give you some feedback? What if we even tried some alternatives and then ran our own SimGym against it? And then if there was a good alternative, then we could propose that to you and say, hey, would you like to try this out in the real world. So there's lots of places you could take this. You just need the technology to be developed and able to put it into practice and have the cost be low enough such that you could be far more proactive with this.
Yeah, no, I think it's, it's really interesting to think about, software development in that phase right now. It's just a really exciting place to be. And on that note, maybe let me ask you, both related to your customers, but even within the company, how do you see, roles within Shopify changing? Like, how do roles change? How do workflows change? How does the workflows change? How are you thinking a lot about this?
I think every role in every company will change. If it hasn't already, it will. And it will change because the moment that you have additional intelligence at your disposal, it needs to change the way you think about working. So now that change may be more minor, moderate to major at the present moment. I think we all probably, many people saw the Anthropic diagram that showed like what is the percentage of potential impact in any specific industry, and then how much penetration have we already had. And then I was on X writing, and just wait until you get all of the humanoid and specialty robots with their intelligence layer added to this. And as someone else took that and actually created a new diagram that showed their projection of what they believe would happen with the help of Claude to do the estimations. And so you could just see that the world is going to look very different. But I don't think all of it needs to leap to this world of replacement, right? That we are going to be supplanted by the intelligence. And will that happen in roles? Yes, I think it will, especially those that are more task oriented. Those are that don't cross over into the world of atoms yet. Those that are more repetitive in their nature. I think they're all ripe for an intelligence layer with the correct harnesses, systems, and processes to end up being dominantly AI driven. However, the more you tilt towards the world of creative development, and this includes software development, right? Creative development, the more I see the AIs being an assistant and one that's a collaborator and pairing with you and not trying to replace you, but trying to give you the opportunity to do more, to do better, to do faster, maybe all of them at the same time, but still requiring the human to be the one who, many people say this about like humans are the ones with taste. But I actually think the other two things we're controlling for is ensure that the right thing got built because the human attention span isn't increasing. So the people to whom you're selling, unless they themselves are agents or robots, if you're selling to humans, there's only so much they can absorb. There are only so many things they could care about, only so many things they could pay for, only so many things that they can change manage all at once. So there's going to be out like natural limiters in the system as to how much you can produce and how much you can push out. And so you need the humans to be those curators, right? People with aesthetic taste as to what makes sense. But every role will change. In fact, the companies need to embrace this by not shunning it, but leaning into it, make the tools available to everyone, encourage experimentation, encourage sharing of ideas, then start building internal tools and internal systems for being able to standardize when good patterns are discovered in your own company, to share out and evangelize for new ideas that pop up. So I think Andre Karpathy has this auto research project that he recently released. It's all the rage in many circles. And so what you want is if inside of a company, a couple of people pick that up and they play around with it and they're able to generate a skill that is able to use the GPU to optimize some part of the business or come up with ideas of some part of the business, you want them not only to be encouraged to do that, but then to be able to share it out, to be able to let others experiment, then start finding patterns between how they're all working, then build a system around it, right? And we have lots of cool stuff internally that we do similarly at Shopify, and finding systems that allow you to now more easily access a thing that used to be more esoteric or only available to a few. And so this mentality, I think, would be tremendous for the sheer embrace of what AI will be able to do and what it will transform, not to overuse that word.
Yeah, no, transform is overused. Taste is also overused these days, by the way.
Yeah, these are buzzwords at this point.
I love what you said, which is the sharing is really important. I think Satya Nadella was on stage and he said this thing, which is, in the limit, the entire company is just one giant model and that's able to run itself, right? Which is But to get there requires, people to change and requires people to share and teach each other. And I think that part of getting people over the hump is something that we really have to do. Like, have to teach people to like not fear it, but actually embrace it. Sort of once you democratize intelligence, everything should get dramatically better. And so, it's really just an exciting time in my mind to like work in tech.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using AI every single day. I have multiple models working with me back and forth from simpler ideas, such as I'm looking to assess the thinking of one of my PMs on this product. Here's a set of related documents. Can you help consolidate for me so that I can see the connected tissues? Can you find any loose ends for me? To far more sophisticated things, such as we're trying to architect a new element as part of the infra stack, and we're looking to understand all of the challenges that may come about, especially as we think about moving merchants from one infra to another. So there's utility to it in beyond writing code. We obviously know that. And you can use it for all sorts of refinement of your own thinking as a collaborator. The other thing there's an analogy that I heard that talks about like scribes in the printing press. And right around that moment in the 1400s, where you end up having a group of people who believe that the printing press is not going to be faithful to what the activity of the scribe is and faithfully representing like what it takes to write that book and write that transcript or manuscript. And the stat I had seen is like it took anywhere between 8 to 10 hours to do one page. And then those who embraced it in the sense of they were never in it for the act of mechanical writing, they were in it for the act of telling the stories and transcribing the information to be shared more broadly, to bring intelligence or joy or information or teachings to others. And so they were able to transform to becoming authors. And so the idea of authorship and the idea of now being able to use this tool to change the way you work, you will never again be a scribe per se, but what the passion that you had for the work itself is unlocked with this new tool that came to life. I thought that was a pretty, apt analogy.
No, that's an incredible analogy, actually. I've heard a bunch, but this notion of moving from scribe to an author and potentially just being much more satisfied, but only, it's a much better way to live your life, but it requires like you being sort of leaning in and sort of adopting the role versus, trying to fight for preserving the status quo. I have a few more questions for you. Or actually, I guess I have a couple of questions for you before we get to the rapid fire. But one of those is this notion of digital payments, right? So how do you think, sort of as we've seen things like USDC and digital payments in general and programmable payments in general being available, how do you think it affects checkout and what new opportunities do you see sort of popping up around that?
Yeah, there are two different parts of that to tackle. The first is the idea of a blockchain-based digital currency and what value it has. And then the second is what does programmable money do for you? And on the first, the idea that you could have a company come to life and provide its services and its value anywhere globally, where imagine that you could collect money this way, imagine you could pay out money this way, imagine you could pay for the SaaS fees or transaction fees this way, all in this single standardized currency with instant settlement and with perfect fungibility back into fiat. There's a lot of power to that. So while it started out initially as the idea of maybe doing cross-border settlements of large amounts of money, competing against the worlds of like Swift and the ACH systems and such like that when you were domestic, the power of it now moving into the world of commerce and into the world of small business and into the world of daily transactional activity, whether it be on spending cards or on as a merchant service like receiving payment, is that it all becomes more efficient if you have enough critical mass in the system. Now, if you don't have the critical mass, there's still going to be challenges because you constantly have to offboard back to fiat at many junctions. But as you get more critical mass, you can see the vision of being able to be globally deployable with a single currency without having to traverse all of the various banking systems. Now, mind you, so long as the regulations in each country have accounted for cryptocurrencies and stablecoins being accepted and being valid.
No, this is a hugely important point. Like, I don't think people understand just how much of a blocker these issues are, and solving them actually could unlock a huge amount of commerce.
Yeah, I encourage anyone to start a business and try to go through the pathway of just dealing with the money portion of that business. And companies like Stripe that came around and made massive improvements to the life of small businesses and enterprises alike on the back of the pain points of the financial systems of the world. And obviously not just Stripe, there are many other companies who've done similar things with great success. Now, when you come to the programmability of the digital money, now you're in the space where you could do some pretty cool things. And rather than cover it all or give you some sort of a framework-based way of thinking about it, let me just give you an example of a thing we did last year in our partnership with Coinbase, where we invented something called the Commerce Payments Protocol. And the gist of it was we wanted not to lose the benefits of the credit card systems having this idea of authorization and capture being separate actions that allows for a company that is selling goods to separate the moment where it captures the intent of a purchase to the delay that exists in the system for when they can fulfill it, that they don't carry a liability of having collected payment any sooner than they've actually been able to fulfill. This helps with the refund rates or charges that they might see. It's actually regulated in some jurisdictions that you cannot collect the payment until you're ready to fulfill. You'll actually experience this with some of the largest merchants in the world. If you've never noticed, Amazon won't charge you, at least in all my experiences. Maybe it's the same in the US, but in Canada, Amazon won't charge me until they've fulfilled. They have my card on file and they have an off, but fulfillment is when the actual payment happens. So in that world, we asked ourselves, well, how would you mimic something like this with programmable money? And at its heart, what you need is probably an escrow. Not probably, that's what we designed. You need an escrow. You need that escrow to have a set of rules, and you need the escrow to have an operator that's trusted by both parties, the buy side and the sell side. So if you imagine Shopify and Coinbase together being the operator, we're able to issue commands to a smart contract that acts as an escrow that is able to first transfer money in and hold it. That's the equivalent of an auth. Push it back if the auth is never captured. But upon an actual fulfillment occurring, issuing a command that says all requirements met, you can now settle, and then the funds will flow to the merchant. And the merchant, obviously, through our systems, is then able to either have that paid out to a wallet with USDC or able to have it automatically settled to fiat with no exchange fees in their account. And both sides do not see the portion of or the addresses of the transaction of the other side. So we have some protection in here because no one really wants to transact if that one simple transaction for $50 reveals their entire history of financial transactions and they lose too much privacy there. So the system is designed such that there's some obfuscation through this design. And the magic of the smart contract is what makes this all possible. The way that addresses are defined, the way that you know who the recipient is, the way that after a period of time, there's an automatic trigger that has the money flow back. So this is what we invented, and this is the basis of how USDC is natively supported as part of Shopify payments.
That's awesome. So speaking of Shopify, you're obviously in an incredible position today with merchants in particular. You have a ton of merchant data. You provide a bunch of services. With data in particular, how do you see Shopify positioned for this AI era? Do you see, where is this advantage, right? Is it in the data that you have? Is it in the model? Is it the merchant relationships? Where do you think the advantage lies going forward in this world?
It's going to be a bit of all of the above. So first and foremost, we are the operational center or the operating system of the merchant. Every bit of data about their products, their inventory, their merchandising configuration, their shipping rules, all of the aforementioned configurations they have about customizations and that manifest in their checkout, their storefront, their retail point of sale system, all of this is the beating heart of their business. And by the way, all the financial capabilities and settlement and such. So when you take a look at that, we are the data center of their business and we are the hub. So now the advantage that creates is we have a seat from which to generate the data that then can speak on their behalf with agents, the data that can help them inform how to be more intelligent about optimizing their business. For example, Sidekick and Sidekick Pulse, and understanding their business well enough to proactively analyze it and then telling them how they can make it better. Having the position with which the magnitude of having millions of merchants, billions of transactions, trillions of dollars processed to be able to work with all the frontier companies and partnerships to create automatic plugins for enabling commerce wherever buyers are going to be. And these are hard fought because at the end of the day, the merchant loves having this as their base operating system with all the flexibility and customizability that it provides them. It's excellent software. And it's software that does not rest on its laurels. We are constantly imagining, given all of this technological revolution, what is it we need to reinvent about our own software? Like, disrupt yourself is the mentality. And you'll see, like, we were earlier than most companies with our agentic assistant called Sidekick in the system. We were earlier than everyone in agentic commerce. We helped pen one of the, very significant protocols with the company you work for. And so the idea that we will always be at the frontier. We were at the frontier when social became a thing, when mobile became a thing. We're at the frontier when it looked like many businesses were going to move towards headless storefronts. And in fact, many still run on headless storefronts. It's an important part of Stack, but it turns out that there was much more longevity to the power of our liquid-based storefronts as well. But we were at that forefront. We invented hydrogen and oxygen, and we started imagining all the ways that you need to be there. So it's this constant reinvestment in recognizing where technology is going, and credit to Toby, our CEO, just being maniacal about being at that edge. And then ensuring that everyone in the company, all of his leaders, are also aligned to that same reality, as we will always be where our merchants need us to be and where their buyers need to meet them. So find a way. So I think that more than ever, maybe AI has given us an edge, that we're able to take all this ethos and this DNA and translate it to ever better software that is on all the frontiers that the merchants need them to be. And, other players out there are attempting the same thing. We stick to our guns. We think we're doing it pretty well.
No, that's a great way to look at it, which is use AI as a way to sharpen the advantages you have, build new capabilities, but really stay true to the mission, which is, I think, something a lot more companies should be thinking in that way. Speaking of, before I get to our rapid fire, one last question, which is, if you were advising, a sort of a Fortune 500 exec, what are, 3 structural changes that you would think about making or prioritizing for the next 18 months?
I think we already covered this one a bit. So maybe as a rehash, maximum availability of the tools that are at the forefront of AI. So whether those tools are for the purposes of doing knowledge work with documents, spreadsheets, presentations, whether they are for coding, whether they are for auditing and doing security management, whether they are for managing your IT department, whether they are for your marketing department and generation of content with sales and advertising, whether they're in customer support at the front line or customer support at the analysis of all the sheer amount of conversations and data you collect. Same thing with the sales pipelines and running through your entire funnel. Not only the systems that sit at the front facing the prospects, but the systems that sit behind and analyze and cross-cut all of that language-based interactions you've had with people, bringing all that business intelligence back. And then recognizing that you have to, maybe point number 2 is, think about augmentation ahead of replacement. Like, yes, replacement of certain roles will happen. We touched on that. But if you start with augmentation, you're empowering people to surprise you with how the value that they can add in the system may differ than your presumption of what tasks they used to do, and so they're just replaced. So maybe we could borrow from the scribes to authors concept here. And then lastly, you need to change your processes to optimize for decision making. So I touched on this as well, but in a world where code is cheap, action is cheap, intelligence is cheap, you really need decision making to not become your bottleneck. So it's not just like, do I have taste, but regardless of whether I do or don't have taste, I need to make a decision whether these things can or cannot ship, can or cannot be actioned, should or should not be pursued. And you, by definition, are going to now have, let's say, that now each have 10 virtual assistants. You're now at 10,000 workers, but usually the same number of decision makers. So you're going to have to change something about that. You're going to have to rethink and retool how you review and how you distribute this kind of role and responsibility.
No, that's really great. Let me make sure I get all of those. The first is don't skimp on the AI subscriptions. 100%. Like, make sure they're available to everyone. The second was at least initially, think about augmenting roles and making people more capable versus like replacing them. And the third really is optimize for decision making versus like running experiments, but sort of like making sure you bring them to conclusion. Yeah, that's really great advice.
Yeah, I'm glad. Hopefully someone out there gets value out of that.
I have a couple of rapid fires for you. So the first one, let us imagine we're in the year 2028. What is one deeply held belief about e-commerce that you think AI will completely blow away by then?
Oh, that's a hard question. I've gotten into the habit of not trying to estimate anything past 6 months from now, given how much the world is changing. But, oh, you know what my gut tells me? I think social influence will change. If you believe in my hypothesis that the word of mouth and brand awareness and being in a world where LLMs are helping you make more decisions with facts, less with perhaps marketing, then social influence is going to be interesting. It's going to probably lessen how many influencers you're willing to listen to and concentrate on the ones who had a really high batting average on whether the products that they were influencing were good, because you'll have so much more signal coming from these other systems that are by definition looking for the facts of the matter of like the quality of a product. If I had to guess one, I think that that's one that is like die hard in 2024. Social influence is everywhere, and maybe it lessens a bit because you just have so much of a counterfactual coming from the LLMs.
Okay, so this is a debate I have with many people, which is from your vantage point, and given the AI superpowers people have, and with the infrastructure set up right now, do you think we'll see a billion-dollar company with just one person anytime soon?
I think it's super hard, even still, incredibly difficult to pull that off. And part of it is that, again, we touched on this already, but your decision making and your bandwidth to manage that many different virtual intelligence agents, right, is just not going to be able to keep up with the amount of content and thinking that they produce. So, will it be possible with changes in the technology? I think so. Again, we touched on auto research, which didn't exist like 3 weeks ago, right? There are systems being invented that allow for self improvement, which you can see getting mapped to self decisioning. And we also know that we can have tools running in Ralph loops, writing code for long stretches of time with high quality. We've also had the manager and subtask pattern in Claude code that you can use. So do I imagine that the systems exist you could get there? You'd have to have one heck of a definition of good authoritative decision making that's delegated. And so billion, it still feels like a stretch to get there.
Okay, finally, we talked about a couple of words that we thought are overused, but if you were to ban one AI buzzword from Shopify's product development meetings, what would that word be?
I guess it's the word context gets thrown around a lot. And the funny thing is at Shopify, we used to use it a lot even before AI came around in this new iteration, because it had a really good meaning as to the information you need with which to then make intelligent decisions. And so now the word context is everywhere to a point that it almost feels so buzzwordy that it's redundant. Like I'd really prefer to have new words better explain the same concept, so we just stop using it, like synonyms that might exist.
No, I like that. That's awesome, man. Mani, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure the audience will get a ton out of it as well. So thank you again for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was a great convo.